I know we're a few minutes behind with officially getting started with today's presentation, but again, I'm Brady Gilbert with Call Brady Computer Services. This is week 5 of the senior training project that I've been working on. I've been having a great time with all you folks that have shown up each week. Again, if you want to share this with anybody, you can just give them the website of seniortraining.org, seniortraining.org. On that site, you can see every one of the videos that we've done so far. Sorry, week 4 video took a little bit longer than I was expecting for me to get out there. Once you actually click on one of these, make sure you then click on this little icon that's in the bottom right corner. Give me a second. Let's see here. I'm going to minimize a couple of things here. So if you click on this little icon at the bottom right corner of the screen, then that's just going to take you to full screen, so it's a little bit easier to see everything. You also do have options within YouTube that I love. If you've already watched it, maybe you're watching it for a second time, you don't have to listen to me at normal speed. You can listen to me at 1.5 times speed. And so if you're listening to something at 1.5 times speed, maybe it helps you get to the part that you're most interested in a little bit faster. Maybe it allows it to become a little bit more of a refresher while you're watching, and then you can slow back down to a normal speed when you get to a part that you need to spend a little bit more attention on. So in addition to that, make sure if you talk to folks who are checking us out for the first time, make sure they scroll down to the bottom. There's where they can sign up and make sure they get notifications about our future meetings. Any of you that have a list of folks, whether it's a community or whether it's a church group, whoever it is, anybody that would be interested in joining us each week, I would love to have some more people on our calls. I love having y'all, but I'd love to see this even bigger. So hope you can help us spread the word. Today, what we're going to be talking about is file management. Now, file management can be a little bit daunting. I was talking to some folks earlier this week, and they were talking about how they have tons of files saved on their computer, but they never can find what they're looking for at the time they're looking for it, or maybe things are just spread over 100 different places and they don't know where to go. One of the things I want to kind of give you a refresher on, let me go back to sharing my screen, is I think we gave an example in our first video of, let's say that the only thing I could remember about a particular file was that it was a recipe we were going to try and find. The only thing we could remember about it is that it had almonds in it. I'm going to click here on my start button in the bottom left corner of the screen, and I'm just going to start typing in almond. And there's my almond cake recipe, which again is a blank file, but just did that to give an example. So if I were to click on this now, then it would open up that blank Microsoft Word document. You'll notice that when I typed in almond, I'm also getting some web results. So if I click on any one of these, it's just going to take me out to Bing and give me search results. But also, since almond cake recipe is highlighted over here, I can see the path, I can see the location where this file is saved, and the date that it was last modified. So there I can see users, senior training, and documents. This is part of what we're going to talk about here in the beginning, is what in the world does this whole path mean? What is the C? Why is it showing up under something called users? And we're just going to get into a little bit about what all that means. Let's imagine for a moment that you have a large filing cabinet sitting right next to you. And in that filing cabinet are a bunch of folders. Inside each of those folders can be what? Well, you could put additional folders, and within those folders you could put more folders, and with some of those folders there's going to be files. There's going to be different documents that are mixed in there. So that's the same way that you should really take a look at your computer. All it is a big filing cabinet, your hard drive, and then within it are a series of files and folders. So when I pull up my File Explorer, here's one common thread for what we're going to be discussing today. There are always numerous ways to do everything within Windows. Some people consider that a pain. I consider it kind of a blessing, because it means that if you're searching around trying to find the right way, it's not just one right way to get to it. There can be numerous ways. So I want to start, since we're talking a lot about file management, how do you get to File Explorer? Most of you are going to have a little icon down at the bottom of your screen, just like this one, a little folder icon. And if I just click on it, it's going to open up. What are the other ways I could get to it? I could right-click on File Explorer and then select the word File Explorer. There is a reason that that would make sense to do, and that is, if I've already opened File Explorer and I wanted to open up a second window of File Explorer, I can't just click on it again, because then it just minimizes it. So what I would need to do then is right-click on File Explorer, left-click on the File Explorer name, and now I have two different options, two different screens, at which point we'll get into this a little bit later, how you can drag files from one screen to another when you're moving files among directories. Here's the way I almost always will open File Explorer, and you can do this right now. If I hold down the Windows key on my keyboard, if you haven't been in the previous meetings, that's the key. That's usually two keys to the left of your space bar. It's got a little Windows logo on it. So hold down that Windows key and press the letter E, like Explorer, E like Edward, and it should also open up File Explorer on your computer. Feel free to close that back, or you can leave it open if you want to. Whichever you prefer. You may want to minimize it while we go through a little bit of a discussion. On the left-hand side of the screen, we're going to see something called Quick Access, most of us will see something called Quick Access. There are some customizations that can be done in all this, but if you have kind of a default setup, Quick Access is going to be one of the things that you see. Now, if there's a folder that I go into on a regular basis, let's say I click into Documents, and I want to always be able to have this North America folder easily accessible to me. I can right-click on that and say Pin to Quick Access. Now that folder is always there for me. You'll see this little pin icon that's just to the right of the word North America, and that means this is going to stay here under Quick Access. These things that don't have a pin only show up because those are directories that I've been into recently. And so Microsoft is kind of suggesting these may be places you want to go back to, whereas these that have a pin are ones that I have chosen that I may want to go back to. Now, if I decide, okay, I'm done with my project regarding North America, I don't need that to show up there anymore, I can right-click on that file, say Unpin from Quick Access, and it's no longer showing up here. We have a folder here for OneDrive, most of us. We're going to ignore that for right now. Then we're going to look down under this PC. Under this PC, we have a number of directories. 3D objects, very few people are going to be involved with. Desktop just shows us the files that are on this screen. So for example, I have this file that's called audio only. And when I pull back up the desktop folder, I see, for example, audio only, as well as that calc example that we just did in the introduction. So any file that I put into my desktop folder is going to show up on my desktop screen. Then I have documents. Documents are just typically where you're going to store any Microsoft Word documents, spreadsheets, PDFs, all of those different files that we create on our systems. We have the downloads directory. Downloads is where if you download anything from the internet, let's say you download an installation file, a driver, a PDF from the IRS website, you download something from your email, most frequently it's going to go into this downloads folder. Then we have music, which is self-explanatory, pictures and videos. Then we have this thing called C drive. So what is C drive? Windows C. If I click on that, that is actually the filing cabinet that we were talking about before. The filing cabinet that contains everything else. Now, most of these folders you do not want to go into and mess around with, because most of these folders have files that are important to Windows 10, and some of them have files and settings that are important to how the computer runs. The most important directory for you is the users directory. So under C users, we have a name for each person who has an account on this computer. Maybe this is a shared computer that my wife and I use. So we might see here a Brady account and a Jennifer account, maybe one for my kids, Noah and Sophie. So each person, when they sit down onto this at this computer, each person sees their own files, their own settings. And so maybe I'm seeing that. In my case, I have my Brady folder, which is my day-to-day work folder. But then I also have my senior training profile. So when I sign into senior training, you're not seeing all my work documents while we're doing all these these training sessions. You may have one or more folders that have kind of nebulous names like default app pool. Those you can pretty much ignore, and again, don't delete them if you don't know exactly what they are. But then you have one other directory that's important called public. So if I save anything into this public directory, then every user, Brady, senior training, and in the kind of sample we gave, Jennifer and Noah and Sophie, any one of us, when we log into our account, could go under the public directory and see the files that are located in there. There's no special permissions needed. If I just went and tried to get into the Brady folder while I'm logged in as senior training, it's going to tell me that I don't have permission to access that folder. Now, there are some steps that you can take if you're an administrator on the computer to kind of get around that, but for the most part, it's going to segregate the users they're going to segregate your files based on who's logging in. Now, when I actually go into, for example, senior training, I'm going to see many of the same things I saw over here on the left side of the screen. So I see, again, 3D objects, I see desktop, documents, downloads. I also see favorites. Now, favorites in this case are any favorites I've made within Internet Explorer or Edge would get a file saved in this directory. I'm going to see my music and pictures and videos. And then if I went into, for example, downloads, then into documents, then I see the files and the folders that exist there. Now I've created a number of different folders and files in this directory just for our example today. But again, if I come up here, I see what are called breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs help me figure out where I am. Just like if you were walking down a trail you'd never been down before and you're dropping breadcrumbs as you go so you can find your way back. This tells me that I started at this PC, which was right over here. Then I went to the C drive. Then I went to the users directory, the senior training subdirectory, and the documents subdirectory. And under documents is where I find all of this. Now, one of the places that this is really important, let's say that you scan a file or you create a new file and you click save. So frequently we just give the file a name and hit save, and then we go, wait a minute, where did I save it to? And then we're lost trying to find it, or we have to go back and do a search like we did a few minutes ago so that we can search for that file. But if I just, when I'm saving a file, pay attention to the breadcrumbs, I always know exactly where I'm saving something to. Let's say that I come in here and I'm looking around and I see that we have all these different locations set up, but maybe I want to have an even higher location. You know, I have world. Let's start by what it takes. If I don't want that to say world, I want it to say Earth. Again, multiple ways to do something, but if I right click on that file, I have an option down near the bottom that says rename. I click rename. Now the text of the word world is highlighted in blue. What does that highlight in blue mean? Well, what that means is whatever I type next is going to delete what's currently in there. So I don't have to, I see so many people, once they get into this stage, they will then click again and then go backspace, 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 and it just ends up taking a lot of extra time. If I have right-clicked on that and select rename, it's highlighted in blue, I just start typing. And then once I've finished typing, I can press enter, and it's going to put it in alphabetical order and rename the file. What's another way that I could rename this? Another way I could rename it is what I call a slow double click. So if I'm off of that file and I click, wait a second, and then click again, then it's going to highlight it. Again, I could just start typing and it's going to rename it. If you are renaming a large number of files, there's actually one way that's even easier, and that is to click on it and then press the F2 key on your keyboard. F2 will allow you to rename whatever file is currently selected. And again, I could just start typing in whatever name I want to create there, and and it's going to make that change for me. Let's say I wanted to have additional folders. So I'm taking a look through things. Maybe I'm looking through a whole bunch of pictures that are all from my trip to North Carolina. Then I might want to create a North Carolina folder that I could then put those into. But what if I wanted to create a new folder here? So I want to create a new folder, and we're going to call this one Mercury. Again, a few ways to do it. If I right-click anywhere on the blank space of the of File Explorer, I have an option that says New, and I've got Folder, so I could create a folder that way. I also have some little shortcuts in the very top left corner of the screen, very tiny, but up here I have a yellow folder icon, and even when I put my mouse over that, it tells me yet another way. Control plus Shift plus N will also create a new folder. So I click on that, new folder is highlighted in blue. What does that mean? It means I can just start typing. And I think I said Mercury instead of Saturn, so we'll go ahead and call this one Mercury. And just for fun, I'm going to create one more, and I'm going to just call it Solar System. And why I've got all these different locations will start to make more sense here in just a moment. So, matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and just create a couple of more. We'll call that one Mars. We'll call this one Saturn. And so you can see, especially if you're trying to organize a large number of files, you can create new folders very quickly. So let's say that I want to take these documents that I've created down here, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and I think all of them should be in the North Carolina, in the, let's see here, in the USA folder. Couple of things I can do. One is I could click this file, and then I could click and drag it, and you'll notice that as I'm moving, it tells me in the little tooltip there where it's going to move it to. Right there, it's saying move to USA. So if I drop it right there, it's going to drop that file into the USA folder. I double click on USA, here it is. Okay, so now I'm inside the USA folder and I want to go back to documents. I can either come up here and click the back arrow, or I can click on the documents folder, and it's going to take me right back there. Well, I've got two more things I want to move in there. Do I need to click each one and drag it individually? Well, if you have certain settings turned on, it's actually going to give you an additional option. When I click Georgia, it puts a check mark by it. If I drag down a little bit, if I select the name South Carolina, it's going to select South Carolina instead of Georgia. But if I bring my mouse over here out to the side, you'll see an additional little checkbox pop up. I can just click on that checkbox, and now both of these are highlighted. Now that I have both of them highlighted, I can click anywhere that's highlighted in blue and start dragging that around. And you'll see on the icon that shows up, it's telling me that I'm moving 2 files. And I can move those 2 files into the USA folder. Okay? Now, that was pretty easy. So, again, as I look through, as I move my mouse down, I see where the checkbox could appear. So I could select, maybe I want to select USA and Canada and Mexico and move them into the folder North America. Okay. I could do that by using the check marks, but I'm going to show you again yet another way to do it. I'm going to select my first location, Canada. Next thing I'm going to do is hold down the control key on my keyboard when I select the second location. So if I hold down control and I click on the name USA, now I have Canada and USA both selected. Let's say I want to add Mexico. Again, right now I'm not touching anything, but if I hold down the control key again and click Mexico, now I have those 3 things that are not all grouped together. I have those 3 things all highlighted. So again, as soon as I click and start to drag, I can drag that right onto the North America folder, and they all move in there. Next, I could take my countries. Now, I'm going to give a different example here. We know that, for example, I could, again, using these check boxes, I could go through and just select the countries. We know that if I hold down my control key, I don't need the check boxes because I can select multiple files individually. Oops, I selected a Camtasia folder. I don't need that. So again, I'm holding down my control button. I'm going to click it again, and that's going to uncheck it. But in this example, we have 4 things that are in a row, and I want all of them. Now, if it's 4 things, it's not that difficult to, control, click, 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 click. But let's say that you had 300 things that are all grouped together, and you wanted all 300 of them. In that case, the easiest thing to do is click on the first one. So we have Africa highlighted. And then I would scroll down if I needed to. Again, if we're using the example where there's 300 things, I could scroll way down that list. And then I'm going to hold down my Shift key, and then I'm going to click the last thing in the list. And I've got a glare on my keyboard, so I couldn't see what exactly I clicked just now. But if I hold down my Shift, it's going to select the first, the last, and everything in between. So when I do a Shift click, I had Africa, then I held down the Shift when I clicked on Australia. Now I've got all the first, the last, and everything in between highlighted. Now let's say, since I've got these 4, I wanted to also add North America and South America. Now I can go back to control selecting. So Shift gets the first, last, everything in between. Control, you're able to click the 1st, the 5th, the 9th, the 23rd, and the 538th. Doesn't matter. And then again, as long as I click something that's highlighted in blue, I can drag that all into Earth. Okay, so we're going to give one last example there. And for here, I'm going to just use the check boxes: Earth, Mars, Mercury, Saturn. And now I want to move these into solar system. Well, I'm going to show you one other thing. If I click up here in my top bar at the top of the screen, I also have an option that says Move To. So I have these things all highlighted. When I click Move To, I could select Choose Location, and then I could go down to Documents, and I could select Solar System. and select move, and it's going to move those into there. So now all of those files and folders that we had in the beginning are now more suitably organized and kind of in a logical order. I'm going to pause for just a moment, and I'm going to take a look at my chat and see if there were any questions that came in during all that. I know I covered a lot right there, so if you have any questions, feel free to just send me a message there. Bear with me 1 second here. Let's see here. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk about, I want to make sure that it's abundantly clear the difference when we're talking about moving files versus copying files. Okay, so now I'm going to go back over to share the screen again. Now let's say I had these three files that I've created, and let's say that I accidentally put a new text document in here, and I accidentally called it Calgary. Okay, so Calgary does not belong in my USA folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it, right click, and select cut. What you're going to notice there is Calgary is now slightly dimmed. If I were to now shut down my computer, walk away from it, nothing is going to happen to that Calgary file. It's going to stay exactly where it was. Because if I cut it and never paste it, then nothing ever happens. But if I come over here to North America and I go into the Canada folder, I can right click and select paste, and it's going to move that file. So here's one thing I want to talk about. Cut versus copy. Okay, for many of you, that's going to be totally logical what the difference between those two are, but keep in mind, okay, if I take my favorite recipe book, and I have a recipe that I want to hold on to. I take it over to a photocopier, and I hit copy, and a piece of paper shoots out, and it's got a copy of the recipe on it. Now I actually have two copies. I have my original, but I also have this copy that I've made, so two copies of it. My alternative, let's say I've got a newspaper or a magazine, and I don't care about preserving that, but I want that recipe that's in there. Then what I can do is cut it, take out my scissors, cut, and then paste it into maybe a scrapbook or whatever it may be, or a recipe book, or put it in somewhere. Since I cut it, I still only have the original copy. It's just we're just gonna move it into a different location. So if I wanted to have a file under Canada, and I'm going to right click and say new, and I'm going to say text document, and I'm going to say places to see. Okay, well, places to see doesn't just apply to Canada, so maybe I want a copy of that to show up under USA. So I could right click on that, select copy, and then maybe I come back over to North America and USA, and I could paste that file there. Now I've got places to see in USA, but since I used copy, I still have places to see in Canada. Okay, so very important difference between cut and copy. So let me show you one more example. Let's say I want a copy of places to see out on the desktop. One of the things I can do, you'll notice that I just did here, is when I look up here in the top right corner of the screen, I have my minimize button, my close button, and then I have what's called my restore down button. When I click restore down, it resizes the screen so that I can see the files that are in the directory, but I can also see what's on my desktop. If I left click and drag places to see over here, somewhere in my mind, I never remember if that's going to move it or if it's going to copy it. So here's what I do consistently every time, and I'm being serious there. I never remember which it's going to do. But if I right click and drag, it says there move to desktop, but when I actually let it go there, it gives me options. Do I want to copy it here? So I'll end up with 2 copies. Do I want to move it here? It's going to take it out of the Canada folder and it's going to move it into the desktop folder. Or do I want to create a shortcut here? In that case, I still only have the 1 copy, but let's say this is a file that I know I'm going to want to come back to later in the day. I could select create shortcut here, and there's my places to see shortcut. And you notice also, if I were to close out of there and now just put my mouse over places to see, I see that whole breadcrumbs that we talked about earlier, that this is on C, users, senior training, documents, solar system, Earth, North America, Canada, places to see. And when I open it up, there's the text document, and I could go in and make my changes to it. Here's one very important thing about finding files that you've recently worked on. Let's say in another video, we did an example where if I use Notepad a lot, I might want to have it pinned to my taskbar down here at the bottom of the screen, so it's easier to find. If I right-click on Notepad and say Pin to Taskbar, I now have an icon here that I can click one time. It opens Notepad, and I can close it, and it stays down here. But if I right-click on Notepad, it shows me the files that I've worked on recently within that program, places to see. If I did that same thing with Word, I can see almond cake. I can see my welcome to week 4 of our computer training series, files that I've worked on recently. And just by clicking on almond cake recipe, it's going to open up that file, which again had nothing in it. If I know that frequently I'm going to be coming back into this almond cake recipe file, I can click this little pin, and it's going to pin that file to the list so that it's always accessible. For me, I have a handful of documents that I'm in and out of every day of the week, and so I will always pin those to this little shortcut bar. So how did I get back in? How did I get to these files again? Again, if I were to close out of here, I'm not going to close that just yet. If I right-click on the icons that are pinned to my taskbar, I see those files, the most recent ones and the ones that I've pinned. If I no longer want this one to be pinned, I can just hover over it. It says unpin from this list. I click it, and now it's just back to a recent. Let's say that this was my Christmas list of what I'm buying as gifts for family, and I don't want this to show up in my recent files. I can right-click and on this file, and I can say remove from this list, and it no longer shows up as a recent file. Bear with me one second. I'm going to look over my list here for a moment. Let me pull back up File Explorer, and there's one setting that by default is turned off in Windows 10, but I'm going to encourage you to turn it on. When I'm in File Explorer, I have these options for File, Home, Share, and View. I'm going to click on View, and off to the right side here, I have an option that says File Name Extensions. If I click on that, now I can see, for example, that these are text files. Calgary.txt, places to see.txt. If I created a new Microsoft Word document, then I see that this is new Microsoft Word document .docx, and that docx tells me it's a Microsoft Word document. That's one of the first things that I will frequently turn on a computer, because I like to see what file type I'm about to open. If I'm about to click on a file and I'm expecting it to be a document and all of a sudden it opens up and starts playing a song, then that's confusing to me. So I would much rather see my file name extensions. So again, when you open up File Explorer, just click on View and then come over here to the side. You can check file name extensions. For the most part, I don't recommend checking hidden items. That has a tendency to show hidden important system files, and if you can see those, you're more likely to delete something accidentally that's important to Windows. So as a general recommendation, I would say leave hidden items unchecked. Let me show you one other thing while we're looking around this area. If I come back up here to North America and let's say we go back into USA, this is what's called the details view. In details view, we see the file name, date modified, the file type, and the size of the file. If I click on view, just by hovering over different items, extra large icons isn't that helpful to me for documents. It only shows, I can only see by looking at this particular file that it is a text file just by the icon that shows up. If this were a photo, let me actually pull up my pictures directory where I've just got a couple of, let's see here. Actually, those are under the C users public and pictures. So here, because we are in a large icons mode, I can actually see a thumbnail of what those pictures look like. If I go to extra large icons, it just makes those icons a little bit bigger. Now, when I only have a few pictures in a folder, this is very quick to do. If this were a folder that had thousands of pictures in it and this were a slow computer, then these thumbnails would take a little while to populate. But so that kind of lets you see what extra large icons, medium icons, which is kind of covered up, so I'll let you see that. Medium icons get smaller, and of course small icons goes back to just showing that, an icon that shows you what file type it is. If I go back under view, I can click on list. Now list is just showing the name of the file. Details, again, details is what I typically will leave something in. Let's say that this were a folder that had 100 files in it, and I'm trying to find the thing I just created. I could click on date, the date header up here, and right now it's sorting the newest things. The newest files are showing up at the top. The oldest files are at the bottom. But if I click date again, it's just going to resort it. So now the oldest files are at the top, the newest files are at the bottom. If you ever get into a mode where you can't quite tell what order something is in, maybe I accidentally sorted everything by size, and now nothing's in alphabetical order and it's impossible to find anything and the dates are all out of order, I can just come over here and click on any one of these headers and it's going to resort it based on name. So again, details is by far my favorite view to be in. And then you also have content, which shows you thumbnails if there are, the name of the file type, even the dimensions of the file, and then the file size. So you can play around with different things without even selecting them. I'm just moving my mouse over each of these right now to see what my options are. Okay, so I wanted to show you that about, especially the part about file extensions. We've talked about renaming a file 3 ways. You can right-click and select rename. You can do the slow double-click, or you can select the file and click F2. I did want to show you one other example of if you were doing a lot of moving files around. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click somewhere up here in the white space at the top of the screen and start dragging. And you actually don't see what's happening on my screen right now. When I dragged my cursor to the far right side of the screen, it made the window that I was dragging around fill exactly half my screen. So I could do the same thing by right-clicking on File Explorer, clicking on the name File Explorer. Then again, I'm just going to click up here in this top area of the bar. And when I start dragging, you don't see it happening, but as soon as my cursor hits the left edge of the screen and I let it goes and it fills exactly half the screen here. So again, just to give you a quick example, let's say I go back to our documents directory and I go back into our solar system subfolder. And maybe I do the exact same thing over here. I go under documents and I go under solar system. Now I could, as I need to move things around a little bit, I could actually drag, let's see here. Let's say that under USA, I started creating new text documents and I accidentally put in here Monterey and another text document for Victoria. Then what I can do, since I have both of these open, is maybe I drill down on the left side to Earth and then drill down to North America and then drill down to Mexico. Now I can take these locations that are in the wrong place and I can drag them from one screen to another. So Victoria can go over to Mexico and Monterey can go over to Mexico. So as you go through and you start organizing your documents, one thing that's going to happen invariably is you're going to accidentally drag, maybe while I'm doing all this work and I'm here under North America, I accidentally drag Mexico to United States. And it was accidental that I did that, and then I take a look in North America and I can't find Mexico. I don't know where it went to. One of the things I can do is I can click on my start button and I can type in Mexico, and then I can see by looking here, Mexico is located under C, User, Senior Training, Document, Solar System, Earth, North America, USA. And I go, oh, that's what happened. I didn't mean to drag it under USA. The other thing I can do, and this can be done from a number of places as well, I could right-click and say Open File Location. And again, once I open file location, well, I don't think that worked because I already have a couple of windows open here, but maybe I just take Mexico and I could drag it right back across here to the North America folder to correct that. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my share here, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. I'm going to take another look at my chat, see if anybody's sent anything so far. Doesn't look like it. I do want to go ahead and let you know real quick, and if anybody does have a question, you can also, if you'd like, you could just kind of wave at the camera and I'll take you off mute and you can ask your question verbally if you have one. I will let you know that next week I'm not going to be available, so our next session will be May 11th, so in 2 weeks at 4 p.m. And again, don't yet have the subject matter for that one. So if you have any ideas, if you have anything that you've struggled with personally with your computer, feel free to send me an email. Again, I always love to get emails if you have any feedback on today's session. And again, the more people you can share this with, the better. I would love to see more folks involved and engaged. And I've dealt with people just today that I can see the frustration when they need to do something with their computer. And more I'm able to tell people, you know what, go check out my second week video and you're going to get a lot out of that. So even if there's things that you know that you've learned about and you hear other people complaining about a particular computer issue, feel free to send them to the seniortraining.org website. They can sign up there. They'll get the same notification letters that you do, and would just greatly be appreciated. Well, I don't see any questions, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up a little bit early today. I hope you all have a beautiful week, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.